The House will come to order. Members, today's prayer will be given by our own Representative Curtis Travis.
Good morning. I'll read a little verse, Proverbs 2, 3 through 6 says, Yea, if thou criest after knowledge, and lift up thy voice for understanding, if thou seekest her as silver, and searchest for her as for hid treasures, then shalt thou understand the fear of the Lord, and find the knowledge of God. For the Lord giveth wisdom, out of his mouth come knowledge and understanding. He layeth up sound wisdom for the righteous. He is a buckler to them that walk uprightly. O precious Lord, O Heavenly Father, O Lord, we are so honored and blessed to be able to come into thy presence right now this morning. Oh, Father God, you're so kind and you're so loving. And Lord, you prepared this day for us. And Father, we have to go forward recognizing there were some who were not able to answer the call this morning. And Lord, we just ask now as we gather together this body, the Lord, that you would pour your wisdom and knowledge upon us. Lord, let us recognize that we represent the people of this state of Alabama, your people. Lord, be with us as we go about this deliberations today. Allow us, Father, to do things that are decent and order in your sight. And then, Father, we ask, Father, for your blessing of traveling grace as we depart from this place, headed on our journey back home. Lord, thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for your blessing. Thank you for the ability to come in your precious Son, Jesus' name, and bow with the presence of the Holy Spirit. In his name, we together all say, amen.
Amen. Members, today's Pledge of Allegiance will be led by our own Representative Francis Holt Jones.
Thank you. On this fifth legislative day, I would like everyone to stop and ponder as you join me in pledging your allegiance to our American flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Speaker, Allman, Baker, Bedsole, Blackshear, Bolton, Boyd, Bracy, Brown, Butler, Carnes, Chestnut, Clark, Klaus, Cole, Collins, Colvin, Crawford, Daniels, Drummond, Dubose, Easterbrook, Ellis, England, Ensler, Estes, Faulkner, Fiddler, Fincher, Fort, Garrett, Gidley, Gavan, Gibbons, Gray, Hall, Hammett, Harbison, Harrison, Hassel, Hill, Hulk, Jones, Hollis, Halsey, Hurst, Ingram, Jackson, Jones, Keel, Kirkland, Kitchens, Lamb, Lawrence, Lee, Lipscomb, Lomax, Lovern, Marcus, McCampbell, McClammy, Mooney, Moore M, Moore P, Morris, Oliver, Paramore, Pascal, Pettis, Pringle, Rafferty, Ream, Reynolds, Rigsby, Robbins, Robertson, Rogers, Sellers, Sells, Shaver, Shaw, Shed, Shiree, Simpson, Smith, Sorrells, Stodhagen, Standridge, Starn, Stringer, Stubbs, Tillman, Travis, Treadaway, Underwood, Wadsworth, Warren, Whit, Wharton, Wilcox, Wood, D, Wood, R, Woods, Yarborough.
"65 members answered roll. Quorum is present. The House is ready to transact business. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Lee, Chairman Lovern.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request that leaves of absence be granted for absent members.
Are any objections? Hearing no objections, absent members are excused. The chair further recognizes the gentleman from Lee, Chairman Lovern.
Mr. Speaker, I have a report.
House of Representatives, your Standing Committee on Rules begs leave to report that it has carefully examined the Journal of the House for the fourth legislative day and finds the same to be correct. Signed, Representative Joe Lovern, Chairman.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the reading of the Journal at length for the fourth legislative day be dispensed with.
Any objections? Hearing no objections, the reading of the journal is dispensed with. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Mobile, Pro Tem Pringle. Purpose of making announcements.
Mr. Speaker, there are no announcements today.
Thank you, sir. The House now in position to introduce bills and resolutions. Clerk, call the first bill on the regular calendar.
On page 2 of the calendar, Senate Bill number 5 by Senator Livingston to provide for the reapportionment and redistricting of the state's United States congressional districts.
Mr. Pro Tem recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think I'm going to stand on this side today and get a different view. Ladies and gentlemen, Senate Bill 5 was substituted yesterday in State Government Committee, and it is now the Community of Interest Plan. It is the same plan that we passed out of this body on Wednesday. So with that, we're voting to approve the same plan that we passed on Wednesday and send it back to the Senate.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Mobile, Representative Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the recognition. Gentleman Yale,
Yes, sir.
I didn't think we were going to get a chance to do this again.
I was hoping we would.
Mr. Pro Tem, we asked quite a few questions when you brought your bill up initially. And the substitute that took place, I would think that that meant that you didn't support the other one that was sent down here. Is that what that meant?
I was not in the committee meeting yesterday. That was a decision of the State Government Committee. I was not there. I was up in the Senate in committee meeting.
And I know you didn't know anything about it, but you know.
It was a total surprise.
Well, what I wanted to try to talk about today is a few things that was a part of what the Supreme Court ruled. The Supreme Court, and I think you talked about this quite a bit the other day, when they said, I think you used the term close to a majority. But that was one very important word you left out of that. It said quite close. Quite close. And I just want to do a little illustration this morning about close and quite close. Now, I'm close to you. Now, there's a difference between close and quite close. And I think the definition I read this morning was that there's no space in between. So I want to just say that the standard was quite close, not just close. I'm close to everybody in here, but we were quite close just now when we were right next to each other, which means we could really use the same mic when we're close to each other, but we can't use the same mic when we're just close. We can do that when we're quite close. And as far as the legislation is concerned, we had an opportunity in this body to look at what was sent in, what was presented, and everyone who presented a plan. I think you reported to us you probably had close to 100 maps that were sent in, 100 plans that were sent in. We actually looked at less than 10% of them. And I understand you were saying that we don't have but one person who can put a map in. And let me just plead with the speaker that we address that. We have one person in the entire legislative body, staff member, who can put a map in. But we invited the public to send it in, not telling them that most of them we would never get a chance to look at. Now, in that group, there may have been a map that was perfect for all of us, but we don't know because we never got a chance to look at them. And so they were not vetted. As we handle them in committee, I have no idea what they were. And I know the general public has no idea what they were. So what I'm asking this morning is, if we're going to stick to what the process is and the rules we pass in the committee, then we ought to be consistent with that. Because what it does is we don't really know if we really had a solution that all of us could have supported. And I would hope that we would have that. And I asked you who made that decision, and you said we brought it down to it. I never could get who we was, and I'm sure I'm not going to give what we is this morning. But I'm going to ask anyway, who was we?
Myself and the other co-chairman.
Okay, yourself and the co-chairman. Okay, you decide that. Okay, so you got a chance to look at all 100 of them.
No, I did not.
You didn't? Okay. We had an opportunity to actually deal with a plan that I think, and the court thought, was acceptable. We got an opportunity to talk and hear from all of those folk involved. We got a public hearing on it that was vetted by everyone. And now we're at a point where we are on something that was vetted by almost no one, was not accessible to the public for a public hearing. And we are moving on with it. And I just think that we ought to put some attention to that, because I don't think that's in the best interest of the state. It's certainly not in the best interest of the public, and actually not in the best interest of the committee, in my opinion. So I would just ask that we at least try to stick to the rules we pass. And I'm going to talk about that a little later, about the rules. But we really think that what has happened here in this process, we have missed a golden opportunity for one time in the state of Alabama to have an agreement where we don't have to have the federal courts to tell us what to do with our maps. And, you know, you, as I said earlier, what you proposed, I've seen your map. I want to get a chance to talk about the actually districts that have common interests. I know you put a lot of emphasis on that. And I understood that one of your objections was that we are so close to Baldwin County, and we are so much like Baldwin County, and in our economic development efforts, that's been key to us. Now, you do know, for the last 24 years in economic development, I was a principal in that. And I just wanted to take a time to tell you that I don't think that has anything to do with either area, with Baldwin or Mobile County. Nor do I think it has anything to do with our present congressperson or a future congressperson, because I think that's really beneficial to us to have that done. So I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about how that came about. I saw some information from the Chamber of Commerce and from various people who, and my opinion, the information is in the error because none of them were there. I was there. So, you know, I just wanted to let you know that I really take issue with that. That is not what the situation actually is, and what we've done over this period of time is not use the facts. We used what somebody's opinion was who had nothing to do with any of them. And that's one of the things that I want to also get on the record today. What I would like to see us do, let me ask this question. Do you think we can wind up with something after we go to conference or wherever we go, we can wind up to something none of us know about? Is that possible?
Anything's possible, but I think we're going to have a plan. We're going to be able to discuss it. Yes, sir. I think we're going to be able to discuss and explain it.
Okay. Anything possible but us getting the VRA map. That's not possible. I really think that that's important, that we need to know. We ought to at least vet the information. I mean, very few of us, if any of us, can explain the difference between what we've seen here. And that's something that's that I think that we need to really look at. And I think as a body is one of the things that we need to pay more attention to. As inclusive as we can be, we ought to be that way. You know, I was required to do that when I was in the other position, and I think we all ought to do that. If we are trying to draw maps, one of the things is we want to keep all 6 of the Congress people we got who are not in minority districts. And yet we want to make the court believe we want to create one, but we don't get but 7. That's all. I don't care how you draw it, we're not going to get but 7. And I don't know how you can put 2 into that, 2 majority minority districts into that without somebody not being affected. So what is your thought about that?
Anytime you redraw districts, whether they be congressional or legislative, people are affected. No way to do it without affecting somebody.
Incumbents are affected.
Everybody's affected.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the answers that you were able to give me.
Hey, can I say this real quick? You know,
Sure.
we're talking about words, and I read this the other day. The word that I apologize and I'm sorry mean the same thing, pretty much, correct? Unless you're at a funeral.
All depending on the situation.
Unless
Much
you're at a
time
funeral.
has expired. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Tuscaloosa, Representative England.
One down, I got 10.
Thank you for the recognition. Good morning.
Good morning.
It is Groundhog Day again.
That's the reason I stood over here.
Yeah. Well, you may have changed positions, but you hadn't changed positions.
I changed location, not position.
So I went back and did a little research, and I went back and I watched our second meeting from the Congressional Reapportionment Committee. And one thing you said there stands out to me. When this community of interest plan was brought up, you said, "This is my plan." And then you changed that and you said, "Well, this is our plan. I will be carrying it in the House, and Senator Livingston will be carrying it in the Senate." Apparently, plans changed. And when he got upstairs, he decided that there was going to be another map that apparently the Senate is going to pass anyway today, and we're going to pass your plan today. And I'm assuming we're going to be in a conference committee at some point today. Is that right?
I would assume that's correct, yes.
Yeah.
But I can't predict the future.
Yep. And I've been racking my brain. I thought about this the whole way up here today. I wonder if you guys have been sitting in a room for the last few days asking yourself, what's the best way to elect more Democrats? Actually, I take that back. Maybe y'all been sitting in the room together asking yourself, what's the way to elect more black folks to Congress? And then I start laughing because I look at the maps, and as I said yesterday, they doubled down on rejected arguments. They doubled down on things that were outrightly rejected by the Supreme Court. It puts together a community of interest that the court said, while important, is not as important as keeping the black belt together. And then it drops the BVAP in both majority or I don't know what you call them anymore. Y'all keep saying opportunity, but drops the BVAP in both opportunity districts, even the one that was historically created by the court to accomplish the objective that the Supreme Court says Alabama continues to fail at. And also, it's interesting, when you talk about community of interest, it's really a community of interest of convenience, because this same argument that you're using to support the map that you created apparently doesn't apply when we're drawing House and Senate maps for the legislature, and it doesn't apply when you're drawing a map for the school board, because the school board splits that community of interest. Senator Figurs pointed out very eloquently that her district, part of her district is now in Baldwin County. So a community of interest is only a community of convenience when it's in terms of drawing a map that is non-compliant. And also, I learned something new yesterday, and I hope former Representative Charlotte Meadows, Charlotte Meadows was listening. You said that, you did the right thing when drawing the maps and sacrificed her seat because of Voting Rights Act compliance, I'm assuming. Pretty sure that comes as a surprise to her. It came as a surprise to all of us. But we have extended a historic opportunity to you, Representative Pringle, and to the Senate. That historic opportunity was that Alabama could recognize some of the wrongs of the past and embrace a map that the Supreme Court in various iterations has said is a good starting point or a good map. And instead, what we decided to do was the opposite. And it appears that there's going to be a compromise driven between the House and the Senate on a map that I don't know if it's bad or worse. I don't know how we're going to, compromise on two really non-compliant maps, but I can't imagine what we're looking at coming out of that situation is a good thing for anybody. And also, when I went back and looked at that meeting, I asked you, Senator Singleton asked you who drew the maps, and you said you didn't know, but you've cleared that up with me. I believe you, because believe it or not, the Democrats and a lion's share of the Republicans in this room have something in common. They had absolutely nothing to do with drawing these maps. Nothing. Many of us have been force-fed a map or two that we had no choice but to vote no on. And I would feel like if I was a rank and file Republican here and I was handed the same sort of map, that I would be, even if I agreed with it, would be upset by the fact that you're going to hand it to me and tell me this is what we're going to do. And I also sympathize with you in this situation because I believe that's happened to you at least twice now. Because whether or not you were well-intentioned or good-intentioned on your community of interest plan, and I honestly believe in your heart of hearts you believe that this is compliant. If that map upstairs drops the BVAP and changes your lines, I'm almost assured and comfortable assuming that you don't agree with that map either. And it's being force-fed to you and not by anybody in this building. That map is not being written or drafted or drawn up by anybody in this building, but it is being drawn up by people who have ulterior motives than making sure Alabama complies with the Voting Rights Act. And as a matter of fact, I can tell you they probably don't care if Alabama complies with the Voting Rights Act, because if they did, they wouldn't take every argument that the Supreme Court rejected and put it in a map and said, take it or leave it. So I think you've also been kind of thrown in this blender too. And unfortunately, when this all goes down and this map reappears, the likelihood is your name may be on a map that is completely non-compliant, unconstitutional, and will land us back in court with a map that none of us have drawn, none of us have agreed to. And ultimately, the whole goal behind the Pringle, Wall, Browns, Livingston Republican map will ultimately be either responsible for it'd be the vessel to drive what's a truck through what's left of the Voting Rights Act, Section 2, or it could be the name on the new district that creates a new Democrat in the Wiregrass. That's not an enviable position to be in. I agree. But I'm telling you, You have an historic opportunity in front of you, and all you got to do is say, hey, Chris, remember that map we rejected yesterday? Bring it back down here, and let's adopt it. Let's get this over with. Let's show the country that Democrats, Republicans, black, white, male, female, so forth and so on can all agree that we want to do what the Supreme Court said. We want to do the right thing. And I can assure you that the map that I introduced yesterday, the figures plan, it is compliant with the VRA. It keeps communities of interest whole, and it even complies with the state's redistricting traditional principles. Matter of fact, as I said yesterday, that plan does it better than every single one of them that y'all have introduced. And we're offering it to you as almost like an olive branch to pull you out of a ditch. So let's not do what Alabama has been historically known for over hundreds of years. And that is us thumbing our nose at the federal courts or in the federal government, and they end up making us do what we should have done on our own in the first place. And I'll tell you, I still got that map if you want me to get it.
Thank you so much.
The gentleman's time has expired. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Lowndes, Representative Lawrence.
I'm good. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the recognition. Would the gentleman yield?
Yes, sir.
How you doing today, Mr. Pringle?
I'm here, sir.
I never thought we'd be having this same discussion that we had a couple of days ago, but here we are. I'm starting to think you're starting to enjoy this abuse.
Let's not go that far.
But
Getting accustomed, but
we since this is the same map that we kind of debated on Wednesday, I won't get into everything that I kind of got going on in my head about this map and how I think it's a bad map, because we've discussed all of the and debated all the things that, you know, we kind of talked about, communities of interest and what the court order said and all that type of thing. Talked about the differences between Dallas and Lowndes and Henry and Houston, and how Baldwin and Mobile have a whole lot of things in common. But what I want to talk about today is, I guess, statements that were made in reference to plaintiffs being okay with or being satisfied with drawing a district that has 40% or less in it. I think you made the statement that the plaintiffs kind of testified to that fact. Is that correct?
I said 40%.
40%
I
or
don't
less?
remember saying 40% or less.
Or 40%. Well, I have a letter here that kind of explains all of that. And when that plaintiff made that statement, it was in reference to the redistricting plans that were before us in 2021 during reapportionment. And he was referring to, at the time, the Singleton County Whole Plan. And he referred to that plan as being the best of the bad, if that makes sense. The whole goal was to try to get 50+%. But in the situation, that was the best that at the time of all of the worst bills that was out there. And so this letter basically says that to that fact. But the plaintiffs also testified in 2022 during this litigation that he would go with what the Supreme Court stated, 2 majority-minority districts. And also, the Supreme Court, the 5-justice majority, they concluded that there's at least 11 instances where the state of Alabama could actually manufacture or produce a map that actually had 2 majority-minority districts. That's what the Supreme Court said. That's why we're here today. That's why we're still debating this deal. I feel like we do have a map that's been presented to this legislature, the VRA plaintiff map, that would do just that, give the state of Alabama 2 congressional districts that's comprised of majority and minority districts. And so if we're gonna just kind of continue to go back and forth, and not adhere to the guidelines set forth by the Supreme Court, in my humble opinion, the governor shouldn't have called a special session. We shouldn't have been spending taxpayers' money going back and forth with something we know we're not gonna do what the Supreme Court said do. We should have just did what the state of Louisiana did, which was say, hey, we're not gonna draw a map, courts, you draw the map. I think I would have been in a better place because I would have probably been on the beach right now. You probably been in a better place somewhere with tending to your business, and the taxpayers of Alabama wouldn't have had to spend all the money going back and forth on this merry-go-round because we know we're not gonna do what the Supreme Court said do. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, sir.
Chair thanks the gentleman. Chair recognizes gentleman from Montgomery, Representative Ensler.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the gentleman yield? Will the gentleman yield?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Thank you. It certainly does feel like Groundhog Day, but important with this matter to continue to reiterate how important this is. I know we're very much in the nuance and the weeds of the percentages and the counties and all of that. I do just want to take a step back for a moment and think about what brought us to this point. And the Supreme Court, I think for a very intentional reason, lays this out before they even analyze our maps, and they provide the full history of course, starting with Reconstruction. For over 100 years, Alabama not electing a black representative to the United States Congress. Of course, I'm making the point then that the 15th Amendment wasn't enough. The reason why then the Voting Rights Act was passed. And one point that I really think is worth noting was that when Section 2 was amended in the Voting Rights Act in 1982, which the court then used to analyze and get us to this point, that was passed by or sponsored by Republican Bob Dole and signed into law, of course, by the Republican standard bearer Ronald Reagan. So I want to point that out because we hear a lot about this as either Democrat or Republican. It has nothing to do with party, right? We had one of the best Republican presidents of all time, other than Abraham Lincoln, sign that into law. And it's important that the court brought that up to understand that this is not about party, that it transcends that. And I think we're here. It's good to see everyone. It's good to socialize. But thinking about that history of how much struggle there's been to get to this point, that people literally died for us to get here, that I don't take any of this lightly, and I know you don't either, and I know none of my colleagues or our colleagues here do, but I just want to point that out, as we think about all these legal arguments. With that said, and I know my colleagues have made the point, and the question that I'll ask you again, and I'll start with this is, do you like to gamble? And it's not a trick question, I promise.
I do not gamble at all.
Good. There you go. So the Supreme Court made it crystal clear. Pass either a second majority minority district or quite close to it. So why take the gamble and go ahead and pass something that is either not majority minority or quite close to it? Why even risk having a court say we got it wrong?
Again, I believe my plan complies with what the court asked us to do.
So how does it do that if and I'm just trying to wrap my head around it, right? Majority minority, meaning 50% plus one or quite close to that. And I know that there are arguments and that, well, they didn't provide a numerical amount, so it's up to us. There's a little bit of that discretion of what that means. But why even go further down percentage-wise instead of going as close to what they said, providing that framework, right? They made it very clear.
I believe this plan, the second congressional district, performs as an opportunity district.
And to that point, and the court says for it to be an opportunity district, right, or as the Voting Rights Act says, the amendments from 1982, again, Republican passed, Republican signed into law, said that in order that minority residents or voters should have the opportunity to elect a candidate of their choice. In your proposal, and the one that we're considering now, how can Black residents or Black voters elect a candidate of their choice without having a majority?
If you look at the results, this is what we call an opportunity district on results of the elections. If you have a candidate that's well-funded and well-organized, it is an opportunity district. Anybody can win it.
So mathematically, right, so the court didn't say form a coalition. They didn't say put together Black voters, white voters, Asian, Hispanic. They didn't say that and then elect a candidate of their collective choice. The court said of Black voters that they have to be able to elect a candidate of their choice. So the math doesn't add up, right? We can analyze and look at if you have a coalition. The court made clear that that's not what the issue is. They didn't say pull together different voters of different races and then determine if they can collectively elect a candidate of their choice. They said, can Black voters do it? So do you dispute that that is what the court said?
I believe this district provides the opportunity to do that.
So I'm think about this in sports terms, maybe. If you're a baseball team, right? And I know we have baseball fans here. If you have 9 players and say for whatever reason I only have 8, and you go up to bat 9 times and each person hits a home run, my team goes up 8 times and each time they hit a home run and they hit 8. Mathematically, if I don't have the majority and you do, how can I beat you in that game? How can I win? In other words, how can the other team elect a candidate of their choice if they percentage-wise and by sheer numbers do not have the same amount or greater?
What's the mathematical of everybody hitting home runs every time they're at bat?
In a best case scenario, hopefully one day it would happen. Another point I want to bring up, and I know that we hear a lot about communities of interest. We're talking a lot about what counties geographically are put together. And while that is all important, the court did make very clear that the reason we're here today, the reason why they affirmed the lower court was because of race. And I know I mentioned this point yesterday, and understandably there are concerns about not making it purely a racial gerrymander, but the court made clear that race can't be the predominant consideration, but we can be race conscious. And in looking at the full picture, the court says, look at the realities on the ground. They say, do a local appraisal to see what are the electoral outcomes in the state. So other than maybe an anomaly here and there, other than maybe a U.S. Senate race a couple of years ago, can you tell me elections in Alabama in the last 30, 40 years when Black residents and Black voters have been able to elect a candidate of their choice, either statewide or in a district where they have not had a majority? Is there even one example? Because the court says we have to look at the realities in the state, and they point out the long history of that not happening. So maybe they missed something. Is there a case or a situation where they haven't had a majority and still have elected the candidate of their choice?
I can't, there's so many variables that go into an election: the candidate, the funding, the organization, the turnout on that particular day. There are too many variables. I can't answer the question. I'm sorry.
It's a simple question, right? The answer is no, right? When there is not a majority of minority voters statewide or in a particular district, the candidate of their choice is not elected. So by passing a map that's anything less than that, under the court's analysis of Alabama and looking at the electoral outcomes here, and they point that out, how racially polarized outcomes are, they say that anything less than that is not going to work. So again, the point, and just going on the record here, we are openly, as my colleagues have said, the Supreme Court has said what we can do, and instead we are blatantly ignoring that. And I guess the outcome people want to have a special master, and maybe that's what we want in the end, is to say, you know, well, this passed, and then we'll have a special master come in. And that's my prayer and hope then, that ultimately the courts ultimately get it right.
You know, I just thought of this because you asked me, can I give you an example of an African-American that was elected in a district that's not majority African-American?
I didn't say necessarily African-American, I said a candidate of their choice. So could be white or black.
Roger Smitherman was elected in a non-majority black county district.
And that's one of how many examples?
It's not, it's majority white, and yet it elects Roger Smitherman. And Kenneth Pascal is in the majority white district, and they elected him.
Well, the last one will make me being mindful of time. You know, my hope again is, and I know that the realities that are here, but my hope is that for colleagues that are sitting, you know, think about the history, think about how many people have sacrificed to get to this point, right? Let's not defy the Supreme Court. Let's not defy federal law. Let's get it right. We take a pledge every morning to the Republic, right? All of that is hollow and empty unless we actually follow through. Again, going back to my original point of what the court said, the history that led us to this point. And I know, and colleagues of mine here hear this, that we have real issues in our communities: gun violence, public safety, mental health, things that I know everybody here cares about. And we could be spending that time in taxpayer dollars in our districts, meeting with constituents, focusing on those things. Instead, my constituents are asking, why are we up here doing the same thing that Alabama has done decade after decade after decade? Ignoring federal law, ignoring the Constitution, getting tied up in court. The residents of my district want to know, why am I here during what should be the off season or off session instead of there in the community, in the district, working with them on the issues that matter? And I'm sure that applies to everyone here, especially that is driven a far distance.
And the gentleman's time has
So I hope you
expired.
don't
Chair
lose note of
recognizes
that.
the lady from Mobile, Representative Clark. And while she's making her way down here, I'd like to recognize the family of Representative David Standridge. Today is his birthday, and his family has come down to surprise him. Dana, Alana, Wes, Caleb, Joshua, J.D. White, and Leah. Let's give them a big hand. Dana, we know you're a good cook, so I expect that you got birthday cake for all of us, right?
Banana pudding.
Banana pudding. Chris has asked for banana pudding. Representative Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, Representative Pringle.
Good morning, Ms. Clark.
Here we are again. You know, it has been stated, and I think you may be among those who have stated, that the plaintiffs support a 40%, a map that has a 40% black district. Like Representative Lawrence, who came before me this morning, I too found that hard to believe. And so I too obtained a copy of the letter that he referenced, that's from the attorneys for the Milligan plaintiffs, that addresses this claim. The letter's dated July 17th, 2023. Have you seen it? Representative Pringle, have you seen that letter?
No, ma'am, it's been referenced, but.
I'd be happy to share my copy with you, but it's addressed to Dorman Walker, counsel for the defendant committee chairs. And it states that several months prior to initiating litigation in 2021, Evan Milligan sent an email to the reapportionment committee supporting the whole county plan offered by Senator Bobby Singleton. But Mr. Milligan testified at the January 2022 preliminary injunction hearing that he supports 2 majority black districts. Mr. Milligan explained that he dropped his support for the Singleton plan in 2021 after he learned about other plans that included 2 majority black districts. The letter to Dorman Walker from the attorneys for the plaintiff states that since this litigation was filed, Mr. Milligan has been consistent in his support for a congressional plan with 2 majority black districts, or something quite close to that, that would fully cure the VRA violation. Now, another point that's made in the letter is that the VRA plaintiff's remedial plan divides Mobile County in a manner similar to our state school board of education districts. And those are based on geographic and precinct boundaries, as you well know. You probably are also aware that part of Mobile County is in State School Board of Education District 1, along with Baldwin and 6 other counties. The other part of Mobile County in the State Board of Education District 5, Mobile County is in State School Board District 5, along with 11 other counties. The Supreme Court's opinion notes that there will be a split community of interest in both the plaintiff and state maps. The Supreme Court's opinion states that the district court understandably found testimony insufficient to sustain Alabama's overdrawn argument that there can be no legitimate reason to split the Gulf Coast region. The opinion states, even if the Gulf Coast did constitute a community of interest, moreover, the district court found that plaintiffs' maps would still be reasonably configured because they joined together a different community of interest called the Black Belt. Now, as we discussed the community of interest, I guess that was 2 days ago, I mentioned, told a story about when I was a bookseller that I had a book signing at my store for the late, great J.L. Chestnut, and you were quite familiar with who that is. And I noted that at that time, I learned just how strong the ties are between Mobile and Selma. And since that time, I thought about another example of the ties that bind us to Selma. And you probably are also aware that in more recent years that it was determined that probably the last survivor of the Clotilda ship was Matilda Creer, who died in Selma in January 1940 at the age of 83. She was one of 110 Africans who were brought to this country aboard the schooner Clotilda in 1860. And as we know, those captives were sold to different plantations in Alabama and probably in other states as well. And then after the Civil War, many of the Clotilda survivors settled in Mobile's Plateau community, which we now call Africatown. I'd like to take the opportunity to invite you to Africatown, which I'm proud to say is in my district, to see the newly opened Africatown Heritage House. I hope that not only you, Representative Pringle, will come and see the Clotilda exhibition in this Africatown Heritage House, but that all of us who are gathered here today will take the time to come and visit it as well. It was curated by the staff of the Mobile History Museum, and they did a first-class job of ensuring, that the history of the Clotilda and Africatown will be preserved for decades to come. For the record, I'd just like to state again that I fully support the Voting Rights Act plaintiff's remedial map. It satisfies the criteria that the court has laid out, and it follows traditional redistricting principles. We should substitute the VRA map for the Livingston map. It would provide Black voters the opportunity to elect congressional candidates of our choice from not just one, but 2 majority Black districts. And that's not likely to happen if this legislature adopts the Livingston map. Thank you.
Thank you. And I saw the Clotilda exhibition at the Gulf Quest Museum. It was absolutely fascinating. It was a great.
Actually, I think those were 2 different exhibits. I saw the one at Gulf Quest also, and it was a good preview for what was to come at the Africatown Heritage House. They are very directly related. The one at Gulf Quest was on the total Middle Passage.
Yeah.
But the one at in Africatown is specifically about the Clotilda and the settling of the Plateau community.
Because I had a lot about the Clotilda and the Middle Passage one.
It did.
Yeah. And ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to point out that it's been brought to my attention that James Fields served in this body in 2008 as a Black representative from Coleman County. So we do have a person that served in this body in 2008, 9, it was while I was gone. that was elected in an overwhelmingly white county, and he was an African-American.
Thank you.
Chair thanks the lady. Chair recognizes the lady from Calhoun, Representative Boyd.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, for the recognition. I believe your last comment referred to Representative James Smith. Do you not realize that always there is a minority, at least one? Do you feel bringing that one example of Representative Smith up to represent what Alabama has been known traditionally for? I mean, let's be real. Just come out and say, what does the court say and prove that this state has done continuously?
Ma'am, the question to me was, do you have an example of any time a minority was elected in a non-majority minority district? That was the question, and that was the question I answered.
All right, you don't need to go anywhere. Do you believe that voting in Alabama is highly racially polarized?
It's been said in the lawsuits, so I'm not going to dispute other people's arguments.
How do you think Black voters in Alabama vote? Traditionally, according to what the courts have found, according to what you and I have lived, and according to what we have done continuously.
I believe they vote for the candidate of their choice.
Repeat that. It's noisy in here. We can't hear. But repeat just what you said. Repeat it for me. Repeat your last.
I said all voters, I believe, vote for the candidate of their choice.
Did you not say all voters do what for the candidate of their choice?
Voters go in the polling, they go in the polls, and they vote for the candidate of their choice.
I guess maybe I'm a little moron on understanding that, because in Alabama's 2021 redistricting map do not afford the opportunity to elect a majority, minority, or something close to it. You agreed, you said history has shown over the years. Moving on, so what was the order that we are to do or should have done at this point? What are the two things that were required? Come on and explain it to me again so that I can get it in my mind. The code stated what was the task.
To provide the opportunity of a protected class of citizens to elect or defeat a candidate of their choosing by drawing either a majority minority district or something close to that would provide the opportunity.
All right. I believe part of what you said is true, but there was a 3-judge panel said in January of 2022, their opinion was the appropriate remedy is a congressional plan that includes what we've been saying over and over. So what you use when you use Representative Smith as an example of one district in the past, where a person had been elected that was not a minority referring to blacks. What is your vision for the future if we use this map that same kind of thing will occur?
I believe this map provides an opportunity in the 2nd Congressional District for the voters in that district to choose the candidate of their choice.
Representative, come on. Well, my time run out. We've just been playing games. That's what we've been doing to me. Just like when I was young, I think we had a game called hopscotch. You may not be there. You jumped. You remember hopscotch? From here to here to here to here to here to here. In my opinion, that's what we've done when it comes to what we were supposed to do. We have played, my terminology is political hopscotch. We did this step, we listened to what committee said, then we go back and we come back and we revise. My thinking for today is there going to be another map?
I don't know what the Senate has in store today. I do not know what I don't know what the Senate's going to do.
Is that what you really know, or at this time what you want to reveal?
If you can tell me what the Senate's going to do, I would greatly appreciate it. Every time I think I know what they're going to do, they do something different.
You've been here as long as I have when we refer to the House of Commons and the House of Lords. All right. If another map is presented, what do you entail or what you wish that map would show or tell us?
I can't answer what I don't know.
It's hard for me to stand here and believe that you are not playing political hopscotch with me, because I think you know a little bit more than you wish to tell a television, because the process doesn't work like that. You know, and I know. Neither of these maps has fulfilled what the court actually asked us to do. Have they? And my time is about up, but just one more time. Just tell me how these maps have done what was charged for us by the courts to do.
Again, I believe the community of interest map complies with Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act.
I don't know what to say except understanding and sometimes having the courage to do the right thing. And I'm going to end this as I've always done. This is not a matter of certain lines. This is a matter of dealing with people, and people in the future, long after you and me are gone. This is serious business. Each of us have to examine within our own selves whether or not we're going to vote, and I know the answer, what we really believe in our hearts and minds, or whether we're going to do what is politically astute and not correct. Thank you for the opportunity to listen to me. But my last thing, as always, is remember in this House of Commons that we represent people. And we must do our best to leave this earth a better place when we leave than what we found it. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak.
Chair thanks the lady. Chair recognizes the lady from Jefferson, Representative Van.
I got one right here.
Again, my approach is absolutely different from those who have come before me. I continue to listen to the sea of sameness, the sea of redundancy, the same questions being asked of the sponsor or the person who's now carrying the bill, the same responses that have been given over and over and over until it's almost it is almost memorized. I rise today once again to speak of the foolery and the level of disrespect that we are showing to the highest court of the land. I sat there and I think I just heard my colleague either speak of a nursery rhyme or something that was reminiscent to it. And as I sat there, I started thinking about when I was a child in school. Little Mary had a lamb, pinned the tail on the donkey. And I just started chuckling to myself, itsy bitsy spider went up the water spout. Down came the sun and washed the spider out. And then I started thinking about simple arithmetic. We're dealing with an order that dealt with simple arithmetic. An order by the court that simply said, send us back a map that reflects 2 districts that could be defined as a minority district. Last I counted, when I went to school, and I'm not the best in math, and I admit that, it's been my downfall, I was taught that 1 + 1 = 2. But today, this week, I continue to see a map that is reflective of 1 + 0 that ultimately will go to the court that equals 1 district that has been reshaped and recompromised or whatever to reflect 1 district of color, ultimately. Unless my memory fails me, people, 1 + 1 should still equal 2. I've listened to all of this fluff because that's all we're getting. Someone who would even dare to quote eloquently Black history, for which I sat there and I became insulted, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to keep it down because I don't want you to gavel me. We've been getting along pretty good. But don't you dare stand up here to me and talk about Black history and talk about who this and who that, because if that's the case, we're going to have a rough time as we conclude this session. But ultimately, we leave here with this. 0 + 0, which ultimately equals no results for which the court directed us to come here. Justice Roberts, in his majority opinion, simply wrote, and this is a Republican, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Chief Justice so eloquently wrote, when he rejected the arguments of the state of Alabama in defending what they called a race-neutral approach, simply wrote these words before the panel. And this was what he said, writing that to the panel, that had properly followed, and they argued that they properly followed the precincts, followed the Voting Rights Act previously. A district is not equally open when a majority of voters face, unlike their majority peers, a block voting along racial lines arising against the Black backdrop of substantial racial discrimination within the state that renders a majority vote unequal to a vote of a non-minority voter. Ultimately, what you all voted on 2 days ago will ultimately end up in another scenario of block voting. for which it will be difficult for anyone of color to be able to win and represent that area. Now, we can leave here today with all of this fluff and all of this talk, but ultimately those were the lines that have been presented. Those are the lines that have come down from the upper chamber that we are discussing now. And those will be the lines that will ultimately be stricken down by the 3-judge panel that I feel confident, unless someone in here has bought these 3 judges out, knows something that I don't know, I still believe in the rule of law, whether I like it or not. I believe in the justice system, whether I agree with it or not. And I also believe in doing what the court orders. And the court gave us a specific order here this week. They gave us an order to send them back 2 districts. Where, regardless of how you chop it up, how you dice it up, how you fluff it up, how you dress it up, you can put lipstick on a pig, you can put a wig on a pig, you can even put these eyelashes that I have on my eyes on a pig. But ultimately, when you finish, at the end of the day, it's going to still be a pig. These lines that you all have drawn are still illegal. They are still in violation of the Voting Rights Act, and they still do not allow individuals of color or minorities an opportunity to fairly run for those districts, to be given an opportunity to seek out. You're dealing with areas in rural Alabama. Rural Alabama voting is typically different from areas in Jefferson County. Everybody under this in this building knows that. The territory, the terrain, the geographical makeup of those areas is totally different from other areas, which makes it even more difficult for those types of races to be run. So if you're talking about fairness, you have to take, and the court takes all of those things into consideration when you're looking at the map. But again, my concern is not doing what the court said. All of the arguments have been made by these individuals that have come here, all of the Democrats that have come here. They've made those eloquent arguments. I'm not here to do that. I'm here to talk about your failure to simply do what the court said do. And when you finish at the end of the day, I don't need a rebuttal. That's why I'm not asking you to yield. I don't need you to come back to me with anything. Because there is nothing you can say to me that would convince me of anything differently than what that 5-4 decision that was rendered in by way of an order by the Supreme Court of the United States and ultimately sent back to the lower 3-judge panel here in the 11th Circuit. There is nothing that you can say. Ultimately, we have 1 in 4 blacks. 27% of this state is comprised of African-American black people. Now, if we are good enough to help build these buildings that we walk these halls in, if we're here to help make sure that these companies flow and business flow every day, if we're here to take care of your children, for which we still have people who are working in domestic houses every day, if we're here and we can teach our children, surely we should be qualified that we can go to the United States and walk the halls of Congress and represent a constituency base that is more diverse than ever before here in the state of Alabama. But when you stand here as the person who has been charged to lead this panel and say differently, what you're saying is our black isn't good enough. Our intelligence and intellect as black people and the ability to lead isn't good enough. And it is an insult to me. It is an insult to people of color. It is an insult to those who are Democrats. I'm not shaking hands. I'm not rubbing elbows. I'm not kissing. I'm not doing anything when I leave and go back to my seat, because I have been bothered all week to listen to all of the responses and all of the answers that have been given. But at the end of the day, it's the proof is in the pudding, and the proof is in the maps that you all have drawn and how you really feel about the possibility of black lives and black leadership. Well, I simply say my black is beautiful and the level of intellect is just as great.
And the lady's time has expired. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Mobile, Representative Bracy.
Thanks.
Would the gentleman yield?
Yes, sir, gladly.
How you doing, man?
I'm good. How are you doing this morning?
Good. We see you on the other side. You moved to the other side today.
Yeah, thought I'd get a different view today.
I want to talk a little bit about communities of interest. And you're subbing this to go back to the community of interest. Is that correct?
The state government committee subbed it to communities of interest, and we're going to send it back to the Senate, yes.
So what was the other one called? Was it Opportunity?
No, it was Livingston 2, I believe.
Livingston 2? I know it's pretty confusing. We've talked some about communities of interest, and, you know, we've had some conversation, and I was kind of explaining to you why I felt that especially the northern part of Mobile County is not necessarily a community of interest with some of the areas in Baldwin County. You remember kind of the conversation we had where in one town in Baldwin County, you have a 98% white population with $83,000 median household income. And in Mobile County, you have a town where you have a 92% Black population with a median household income of about $32,000. How do we come to the conclusion that these two areas would be considered communities of interest? Can you help me kind of understand that a little bit?
I mean, Mobile and Baldwin County, if the families intermingle, people work on both sides of the bay, they commute across. You hear us talk about it. We're crossing the pond. We drive back and forth between Mobile and Baldwin County constantly.
Right, but I'm talking about the northern part of Mobile County, the part that would be very similar to what was removed to create District 5 of the state school board.
Well, you know, the school board has 8, not 7. There are 8 school board members, and there's a deviation factor of 5% over or 5% under. So you're not exactly comparing apples and oranges because of the deviation factors in the two, and they're not the same number of seats.
So you're saying that the state school board map would not be relevant in this conversation?
I say it's not an apple to apple comparison.
Okay. Under your map, the one that initially came this morning, I guess the Livingston map, it shows that, you know, Black people will have like a 1 out of 15 chance of winning. And under your map, it shows that it's more like 4 out of 15. And I'm just wondering, do you feel that that's in a true opportunity district, 1 out of 15 or 4 out of 15?
I believe this map complies with the Voting Rights Act, yes.
Meaning, but I'm talking about when you mentioned about the Voting Rights Act, you've had, did the courts ask you to draw 2 minority districts, minority majority districts, or something close to it? Did they give you something kind of specific like that?
They said 1 or 2 majority, minority, or something that would provide an opportunity, yes.
Okay. Now, based off of what I've seen on the redistricting reapportionment website, you have 22 maps listed on there, right?
I'm sorry.
You have 22 maps. Now, I don't have nobody texting me, so they need to start texting you, though. Or you need to at least tell me who texting you so I can know who against me.
A lot of them are my girlfriend who's watching.
That's not who's texting. But so it was 22 different maps on the website, correct?
I would believe.
Don't you run it? I mean, it's your thing. It's your show, right? It's 22 is Okay. So out of the maps, you have like plaintiff, plan 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Then you have the VRA plaintiffs, the CLC community of interest. You have the community of interest plan population summary, AKC, expanded black belt, Hatcher, opportunity, Russell split, Singleton congressional, 3 population summary, and whole Jefferson County. Those are the 22 plans out of the hundreds, I guess, that you receive that you have on the site, right?
I would believe what you're saying, but I don't know.
Okay. And your plan is one of the plans on here, because the community of interest plan is on here. So that would mean that your plan is one of the ones on here. Have your plan been looked at by the courts?
It has been analyzed, yes. A performance analysis has been done on it.
Okay. And the reason why I asked is because I know that you mentioned that the plaintiff's remedial map was never presented in court. You mentioned that, right?
I said, you know, it was never presented at trial. There was a court hearing, and I'm sure it was part of that.
Wasn't presented at trial. But there's
not a trial, there was a hearing.
The hearing. But the other 11 plaintiffs' maps were presented, right?
You know, I'm going to acquiesce to you.
No, and the reason why I'm asking is because I'm trying to figure out how did we go past all of the 11 that were presented to come to something that was not presented, that was stated that it was created based off of the public hearing that was held, and the input from the public was how the map was created. But that's not what I heard the public asking for. It's different than what I heard the public asking for. And the 11, now I'm not talking specifically about the VRA plaintiff's remedial map, but the other 11 also gave an opportunity to have maps that met what the court was asking us to do. It shows you that it's more opportunities out there to create 2 minority districts, and it's proven. It's proven right here based off of the information that you have on your website that over half of the maps, at least over half of the maps that you have presented here on the reapportionment website are more in compliance with what the courts are asking for than any other maps that we're looking at today. Then the map that you stood up and fought for as this is the best that we could do on Wednesday, as the Livingston map. And I'm sure it's going to be more in compliance than whatever comes out of the conference committee or whatever we end up deciding to do at whatever point today, because all of these other maps provide the opportunity to have 2 majority districts, over half of them on the site. Were they even considered? Were these maps considered?
You know, we also took in consideration not racially gerrymandering our map.
But racially gerrymandering is what created the problem in the first place.
Yeah, well, those maps,
right?
We think break communities of interest strictly along racial lines.
Chris, if race created the problem, won't you have to use race to kind of fix the problem? If that's what created the problem, how do you not use that as a community of interest or as something to look at to say, this is what we need to do? How do you come up with 2 majority districts if you're not putting together these communities of interest, and some of that is based off of racial patterns, migrational patterns, and all of these different things, poverty, economics, all of these different things that draw these people together. Guess we'll have some more conversation at some point today, but clearly you have over half on
and
your
gentleman's time has
website.
expired.
that meet compliance. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Clark, Representative Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thanks for the recognition. I am speaking to the master of gerrymandering. Mr. Pringle, you know, earlier today, we recited Pledge of Allegiance. One nation under invisible God, with liberties and justice for all. And that's not real, is it? There ain't no justice for all. Justice for us. So what I'm here to really talk about, you referenced James Fields earlier in your comments. James Fields served in this House 2 years, came in on a special election. Next year, you ran him out. He ran for lieutenant governor. Kay Ivey beat him about 700,000 to 400,000 votes. He ran for Congress. So when we talk about minority-majority districts, we're talking about minority-majority occupation of the people. And my purpose here today is to bring the focus back to the people. And when I look at my district, 68, Interstate 65 South, all the way to Highway 80 in Uniontown, you're trying to figure it out, the commonality of that community. Evergreen, Alabama, Uniontown, Alabama, how that fits in here. But this congressional district that we are talking about is all about people. And our entire system of democracy rests upon the core tenet of one person, one vote. And that's why we are here, because the federal court said that we weren't doing what we've been purporting ourselves to be doing, giving opportunity to all. And people often finish that phrase with what I value. I have people in my district saying my vote don't count, and I can understand why they would say that, because they're people of interest. A person they want to elect is never get elected because they're in the minority all the time. So the courts have given us an opportunity, and it's so irresponsible for us as policymakers to snub our nose to our federal court and not abide by the law. And this means that in order for each person to truly have one vote, those voters must be of the same value. Because we are all of the same value, we must have that opportunity to vote for the person of our choice. And you sit there and you look at me and you drew this district and you knew it and you know what you're doing. I mean, it's very clever how we are here trying to hold on to the little things that has been granted to us. And then we have to fight for this, to just to represent. It shouldn't be. We talked about justice for all. I mean, that should be the first order of the day, to do what's right. What we have seen and what the federal courts have said is that blank votes in Alabama is not of the same value and of the same vote and other votes. Black voters have been systematically deprived of each value by splitting the strong communities of the Black Belt into various districts. And with the racial polarization of voting in Alabama, which has once of the Supreme Court's finding Black voters do not have an opportunity to elect the candidate of their choice unless they have a majority in that district or quite close to that majority. And that's what the courts gave us to do. But you say that 40% is close you can get to the majority. I kind of not get. I heard my colleague said math 1 + 1 = 2, but not in this body. It doesn't. We're here to reunite our community so that the voices of our people can be heard. And the only way that we can be heard is at the ballot box. We want to reunite them in 2 adjoining districts where they have a fair opportunity. And I truly wish that voting was not a racial and not polarized in this state, but it is, and it's a bad sign of our nation. And the courts have given us that it is a bad sign, and they gave us a map to correct the wrong that we've done for so long. But the federal courts found that we are not true to our statements. And the federal courts have given us an opportunity to make ourselves whole. It is not about Democrats or Republicans. It's about people. And when we reunite our communities together, they will finally have their opportunities to elect the candidates of their choice. You know, on Monday when I got here, there was a book on my desk. The lesser of the magistrates, I believe that's the title of it. And what I discovered in that reading, some very interesting reading, but it's a lot of propaganda in there. See, it was those men that used truth, Martin Luther, John Calvin, Wesley, Knox, to stand up against the tyranny of the state church in Rome. So they started a protest. They got together, and what we call the Protestant Reformation is over 500 years ago, because the church was wrong. And these men, priests, bishops, and pastors came together with truth. They read the book of Romans, written by Paul, and they found that the salvation was not by works, but by faith. And they started the Protestant Reformation that brought this nation into being. People leaving that nation of tyranny, of religious persecution. And they came out of Rome and came into this nation, found themselves to be a nation that because they wanted to have freedom of religion and civil liberties. And that's why we call ourselves United States of America, because of a protest that started in Europe against what was wrong. And why can't we stand for what's right in this hour? You know, before I go to my seat, I want to say that it was, as we go into the closing of our earth history, 13th chapter of Revelations coming into my mind right now. The 2 beasts, one coming up out of the water, and the one coming up out of the earth, which is giving authority to the one that came up, making us, compelling us to do what they decide for us to do, not what is right, but what is good for them. So we're in this posture right now, and we must realize that we have a duty to perform, and that duty is to do what is right according to the word of the scripture and what the Supreme Court has put in print before us to make whole those who have been wounded. And I hope that you will come to that conclusion to make the wounded whole. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chair thanks the gentleman. Chair recognizes the lady from Montgomery, Representative Morris.
Who's coming up?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the gentleman yield?
Gladly.
You know, I've been sitting and I listened carefully and trying to find the right words to actually say. You know, it's one good thing that came about this whole sad situation is that we are learning more about redistricting and the Voting Rights Act right now, right? It's giving people the perspective and perception to actually go look at some things that we may have or may not know at this moment. So that would be one. And, you know, for me, coming out of Montgomery, 1965, you know, it's just like deja vu all over again, not from my eyes, but from people of color eyes. I have listened to all of the debates and the arguments over redistricting principles, the Constitution, the federal Constitution, and the Voting Rights Act. The jingles test, the shape files of it all. And I listened to you bring up Mr. James Field. I don't know if you brought up Mr. James Field to dispute the court's ruling, or to show that, you know, a black man was elected, because that's what you said. I don't even know why somebody gave you that reference. That was not a really good reference to bring, but on your side, but on our side, it was a really good reference, because when you mentioned James Field, he was in a majority white area, and they were able to elect a candidate of their choice. James Field was elected based on a majority white district's choice. So it was, when I heard, I was like, I don't think they should have really given you that one, knowing that we can still pick out some people that's serving now in the House. That's in a majority white district, who was actually sitting now, was elected based on their choice. We have members serving now on the Democratic side, also in a majority black area, who is white, ×2, but they elected based on the district's choice. It wasn't based on adding a couple people, different nationalities together. It was strictly based on that demographic that live in that area based on their choice. So we're not saying that if you're black and you live in a majority white area, that you can't be elected, or you white and you live in a majority black district, that you can't be elected. But the courts did say that polarized voting does take place, and we always have some exceptions to the rule. So when you brought up James Field, just tell them next time, just don't, because that still gave a candidate of their choice. And that's what the courts are telling you to do, to give us a minority district so that they can elect a candidate of their choice. It doesn't matter their race. It doesn't matter about the person that's being elected, but just to give them the opportunity to vote for a candidate of their choice. So the Supreme Court found, based on racially polarized, that black voters in Alabama vote in a politically cohesive manner,
that Black voters vote for Black preferred candidates at a 92.3% rate, and that white voters only vote for Black preferred candidates at a 15.4% rate. That was found by the Supreme Court. Now, again, we always have those exceptions to the rules based on work ethics, based on what it is that you're going to bring to the table, where people actually listen to what you have to say before they actually elect you. You got something you want to say, Prince?
He was talking, I couldn't hear you.
Oh,
I'm trying to listen to you.
I appreciate that. But in order for people to elect a candidate of their choice, they have to be in the majority or close to it, right?
A district that would provide the opportunity, yes.
But how do you provide an opportunity? What does that look like?
You know, according to my election analysis, that this district, the way it's configured into this plan, can elect, you know, anybody.
So you're saying based on your analysis?
Well, the analysis of the person who does these analysis.
Okay, so based on the person that did the analysis, they came up with anybody in this district can be elected.
That's my interpretation, yes.
But what did that makeup look like? Was it based on just majority or minority, or was it based on different nationalities in that area?
It was based on election returns.
Of?
Different elections held in what would constitute the 2nd Congressional District.
So it came based on different groups of people coming together?
The electorate, yes.
But the courts asked for what?
Provide an opportunity
for
a protected class of citizens to elect or defeat a candidate of their choosing.
For what group of people?
A protected class of citizens. People who are protected under Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act.
Just don't want to say minority, do. But, okay. So what do you think about the Supreme Court ruling?
I think the Supreme Court handed down a ruling that we are obliged to comply with, and I believe my map complies with what the court has ordered us to do.
So your map complies with it, and it's given based on the demographics in the area of different nationalities coming together to be able to elect a person. But if you're going directly by what the Supreme Court said, they asked for a majority, minority map. And I just think that the road that you're traveling down with the map that you presented is not what the Supreme Court asked for. And I think that you know that it's not what the Supreme Court asked for. And we'll be back again doing something all over. But I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Marengo, Representative McCampbell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the recognition. Will the gentleman yield?
Gladly, sir.
You know, it's interesting that we are here. I think several states have had some rulings since ours, if I'm not mistaken. And I think one of them was even Louisiana. And they chose to not waste taxpayers' money, but rather go on and allow the courts to draw the lines. And we are barreling quickly toward that same scenario. You have a new map up here today that I guess came out of the Senate. Am I correct?
Senator Livingston's bill was substituted yesterday and is the map that we passed Wednesday. What we've already passed is what's before us today.
We have passed this map,
Yes.
Senator Livingston's map.
No, we passed the community of interest map, and that community of interest map was substituted in committee. So that's what's before the body today. Is
So
the
that's-
map
okay.
We debated and passed
Okay.
Wednesday.
Well, you know, I haven't been up to the microphone yet in this chamber regarding this issue. And so it's an opportunity for me to just talk about some things that I've found as I've sat back and watched. So I've been very aware of what's been going on. You know, the big takeaway I have is that this body, the legislature, never put itself in a position to honor the federal court's mandate. We just haven't, I'm going to choose to honor the federal court's mandate. We are going to be very blind to the reality of the federal courts asking us to do the right thing, asking us to do those things that are fair. Instead, we are going to barrel on down a road, as Alabama usually does, and have to be told what to do. You know, I wish we could grow up as a state. I wish we could grow up as a state and understand that we can make good decisions that are fair and equitable and do the right thing every now and then. You know, this begins the process of lack thereof. It is reflected in the statements from our deliberations. We've deliberated this for a few days now, but we haven't gotten through to the people that we have been deliberating with. You have a pattern and a path that you're going on, and you're going to go down that pattern and path regardless. We understand that, you know, and that is also visible to the people that have been watching and those that have been listening. You know, from the beginning, the process has not met the norms of public access or input. You haven't even, we pretended we are going to allow the public to have input, but we haven't even met the norm of allowing the public to have input. We made the decisions. You've talked about it was you and Senator Livingston that drew a map and brought it to the committee that is supposed to be in the process of helping to draw these maps, giving input from different people so we could try and get it right. Yet and still, once again, we fail to include not only the committee, but the public as well. You know, we've had a month and a half from June the 8th, the day of SCOTUS ruling, and July the 17th, the start of the special session. The map up for consideration now was revealed to the reapportionment committee members on the evening of July the 14th. That was a Friday before we came into session. The actual committee responsible for it received it then. The public did not see the map until July the 17th at 10 a.m. with a hard copy, and those hard copies ran out. The only other access available between July 14th and July 17th was on Twitter, when Representative Chris England posted it on his Twitter page. What kind of place are we in when the citizens of this great state have to go to Twitter to get public information? Most of all, we knew about the litigation from November of 2021. Did we not all anticipate that our actions of redistricting would catch up with us one day? Did we not anticipate that we may have to draw another map? You see, the timeline looks something like this. November of 2021, the original legal filing. January 2022, state's request for a stay in federal court. October of 2022, oral arguments in SCOTUS. June 8th, 2023, SCOTUS opinion released. Knew at this time that redistricting would need to occur. June 27th, first public hearing. Guidelines were supposed to be adopted. Chair Pringle, delayed adoption of guidelines. The delay of guidelines was later used to justify the lack of progress on reviewing maps and the lack of public notice on submitted maps. June 7th, 2023 was the deadline for submission of maps from non-legislators. June 13th, 2023, second public hearing. Guidelines adopted and only 3 maps were discussed. June 17th, 2023, final public hearing. Note, this public hearing scheduled at the last minute due to failure of committee to decide upon a map previously. Discussed 10 maps, many of which were released to the committee members on the 14th of July. New maps never posted to the committee website or released to the public. Throughout this process, people have picked and chosen selected parts of the federal court's ruling to try and justify their plan. But you can see that reflected in the comments. The 3-judge panel said that a proper remedy will consist of 2 majority-minority districts or quite close to. Quite close to. You know, my time is about out, but I'm going to quote my colleague, and this is what he said. Once again, the supermajority decided that voting rights of Black people are nothing that this
time
state
has expired.
is bound to respect. This is the rest of it. This is the rest of it. Your vote is dehumanizing.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, sir. Question for the body now is the adoption of the sub. Clerk will unlock the machine and the members will vote. Clerk will lock the machine. Record the vote. 76 ayes, 26 nays. The sub has been adopted.
What'd you say?
Chairman Pringle.
Mr. Speaker, I move adoption of SB 5 as substituted.
That is question for the body is adoption as substituted. Clerk will unlock the machine and the members will vote. Clerk will lock the machine, record the vote, 76 ayes, 27 nays. SB 5 has been passed. Clerk, call next bill.
On page 2 of the calendar, Senate Bill number 3 by Senator Chambliss, a constitutional amendment relating to the Constitution of Alabama, 2022.
Chairman Carnes, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is exactly the bill that we passed out of here 2 days ago. It's been kind of around the flagpole a couple of times, but it's right back where we wanted it. This only deals with problems in the House of Representatives. And with that, I would ask for adoption of the substitute.
You heard the explanation of the sub. Chair recognizes the lady from Jefferson, Representative Van.
Representative Carnes, thank you for bringing this bill. I certainly hope, I know we'll have the requisite number of votes to move it. And I'm hoping that this will, and I guess I should have asked this question, do we think this will be the final fix for this issue of the BRR? And that's what I did not ask you the other day. With regards to this issue, because this is now, we're 4 years out, I think roughly somewhere around that time period that we had to go to the, you know, having the 30-something votes or what have you. So do we have any clarity on that this will be the fix once we move toward the constitutional amendment?
Absolutely. This is the fix. You know, I think everybody in this chamber recognizes the talent that the leader of our legal department has. And
who is that?
Othni.
Othni who?
Latham.
Yes,
And,
we do. Now, if I don't agree with you on a lot, anything I know, that's one thing I wholeheartedly agree on in this house. Absolutely superb.
Right. And this was brought about, as you know, this was brought about by lawsuits that are pending based on the fact that currently we have 32 minimum votes for a BIR.
Mm-hmm.
And I explained the other day we got there from the minimum quorum is 53. And you take 3/5 of 53 is 31.8, you round it off to 32.
Mm-hmm.
But as we know, many, many times, and I would say most of the time, we'll have 32 votes for the BR, but we may have 50, 45, 55, 65 abstentions.
Abstentions.
And those are counted as votes. So if you technically look at this, we are not in the 3/5 category. And so with that as a background, we've got several hundred local bills. If we do not pass this bill and ratify the bills that are already kind of in the basket in our rearview mirror, we could withstand a lot of problems.
And that's what I wanted to talk about. What happens with the bills that we've already passed under previous votes or previous rolls? What do we know?
They will be ratified in the in the March 5th primary.
So there will be, that's what I didn't ask, and I was just trying to get the clarity, will there be a ratification of those? Now, did that come by way of an order of the court, or that's just what?
We're being preemptive and trying to be aggressive and take this into account ahead of time. So.
Okay, yeah.
We haven't been ordered to do this.
We haven't been ordered. We're just trying to,
We're doing it out of caution. and to prevent future problems.
Okay, preventative measure. Okay, I just wanted to get the clarity because if every time, even when we moved to the 32 votes, I had concerns with that, and part of that, and Representative Rogers is not here, started with one of the many lawsuits that some of the bills, though, I tell them, I say, you get us in trouble with more lawsuits around here with some of the Jefferson County legislation than not. But okay, so I have a better understanding, but I just want to make sure, and hopefully this resolves that issue. And a lot of folks really don't pay attention when you were dealing with technical bills, but they really just don't understand, the gravity of what this legislation means to us and the bills and the legislation that we move forward. Because as you just said, it would possibly cause the bills that we pass to go.
It could create chaos. If this is not resolved.
Yeah, because there are those folks that are looking to challenge, and we do live in, regardless of what, we still live in a democracy, and sometimes I guess these days democracy is subjective, especially when you're in this forum and there's someone who can determine, who speaks and when, and lights go on, folks can't speak, and they cut, so I'm just used to that. I'm more.
Well, I appreciate you coming and clarifying the ratification problem, because that is the very heart of this thing, to ratify things that we have passed in previous sessions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Well, I just wanted to be clear. So once this passes out, okay. Well, this is a good legislation. Hopefully it will save all of the 700 good bills that we've passed out of here, local bills that we've passed out of here. And thank you for your efforts on this. How did you end up carrying this bill?
I was asked by the Speaker of the House to carry this bill.
Oh, the Speaker asked you to carry this bill. All right. Well, I told you there's power in that chair. There's power in that gavel. I told him there's power, there's promise, there's provocation, and several other T's that I rolled out at the first of the year about that chair and that gavel. Yeah. I told him he need to get him some glasses, because I know he saw my light on a little while ago, and he ended up calling for the vote on that substitute. So we got to make sure, Mr. Speaker, you come back in here right for the session. Now, unless you have some contacts on or some LASIK or something, we make sure you get your eyes right when you come back. But I understand it takes a little time. But so you got, well, all right, Mr. Carnes, you did good on this technical bill. We appreciate your efforts.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Move for passage, Mr. Speaker. Oh, we don't. Okay.
Question for the body is adoption of the substitute. Clerk will unlock machines and the members will vote. Yeah. Clerk will lock machine, record the votes. 101 ayes, 2 nays, and the sub has been adopted.
Move for passage of sub, Mr. Speaker.
That is question is final passage of SB 3. Clerk will unlock machine and the members will vote. Clerk will lock machine, record the votes. 101 ayes, 2 nays. SB 3 has passed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you,
Mr.
members
Chairman.
of the chamber.
Clerk, call next bill.
On page 3 of the calendar, Senate Bill number 4 by Senator Orr relating to the employees' retirement system.
Y'all switched on me 3 different times. I didn't know who was carrying this bill now.
Keeping you on your toes.
You are, Representative Bed, so you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, as the ever-going conversation about increasing school safety, to that end, last session, we passed a bill that would allow more law enforcement officers to be hired in their retirement status to be inside of our schools as school resource officers. The specific language that we used in that bill did use those words, law enforcement officer. Today, what I have before you is a slight fix that will allow anyone who is retired as a state policeman to also be included in that so that they can work inside of our schools as school resource officers and make up to $52,000 in their retirement status.
Heard the explanation of the change. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Baldwin, Representative Simpson.
Thank you for the recognition, Mr. Speaker. Will the gentleman yield?
Yes, sir.
I want to thank you for your passion with this. I know this is something that you have fought for years. This is something that we all should be proud of for what we're doing to give more opportunities for schools to be able to economically save our children. So many law enforcement officers start young at 22, 23, you know, when they started the profession. When did you start? When you started?
23 years old.
23 years old. So they serve their 25 years or what they're looking for, and they're 55, 56, 57 years old, and they're still capable of serving, and they're still capable of protecting our children, but we unfortunately put them out to pasture, and we put them in spots to where they can't do this anymore. So to this bill to allow citizens 55, 57, and I used to think 55, 57 was old, but the closer I get to it, the younger 55 and 57 seems to me. So, you know, to have able-bodied individuals to be able to go to our school system and be able to protect our children. As you see the rise in school violence that we have, a lot of the fights that come, the threats that come not only from outside the school system, but a lot of them come with inside that school. So to have the presence there already, so you don't have to wait for a sheriff's deputy to come from wherever where they are, how far away they are, or an officer to come from wherever they are, to have school safety readiness to be there and to allow so many of our state troopers, which is what this will do.
That's right. It allows anyone who's a state policeman, by definition, to serve in that capacity inside of a school in their retirement status. Absolutely.
To allow them to be able to continue to serve our state, to continue to protect and serve and protect those that are the most needy of it. This is a tremendous bill. This is a tremendous opportunity. I think we did something even for corrections as well in this bill last year, right?
That's right. It allowed the opportunity for anyone who's retired as a correction officer with the Alabama Department of Corrections to go back in their retirement status to help offset the staffing issues they're having inside of ADOC, to work there in a retirement status and then increase their cap as well. So another area in which we know we need some help. I mean, you know, every employment sector that we're seeing out there, there's shortages out there, and that's no different in law enforcement right now. So if we can do something like this to keep our schools safe, this is a great effort.
The Department of Corrections, and we could be here all afternoon talking about everything going on with the Department of Corrections, but they've done a tremendous job recognizing this need and recognizing the need to have COs, the corrections officers, to be able to come in and continue to serve at an economic advantage for the state of Alabama. You know, this is much needed. We have a very difficult time. I'm happy to serve on the Joint Prison Commission Joint Prison Oversight Committee, and we talk about the shortage of staffing. May of 2023 was the first time in some time that they actually had a green number, meaning a positive number of employees for the Department of Corrections to be there. That's what the courts have talked about. We talk about this DOJ lawsuit that that's the headline of the day so many times. That's what they want. They want staffing. They want us to be able to have and provide guards. So many months we're losing, even if we're training, even if we're doing the process to get people the opportunity to come in and learn these things, we're still losing guards. but to be able to have the retired people to be able to come back and to continue to serve as corrections officers, hopefully we can continue this new trend of having actually more corrections officers than we had the month before. Yeah. And we can start a pattern of doing.
No, I think at the end of the day, I think we all agree we would like to have those full-time positions filled by career-minded full-time individuals. But in the meantime, while we're having to fill those gaps, the bills like this that allow us to bring some of those, and I'll just say I'm not in my 50s yet, but I could retire as soon as this October, and I'll actually be just shy of my 48th birthday. So you've got guys like myself who still feel like they could do the job, and especially when you're talking about in a role like school resource officer. I mean, what we didn't realize there, I think, when that program began in earnest with the tragedies of school shootings, is that we saw that as it is intended for security, but the unintended consequence, and the thing that I really love about it, is the opportunity to build those relationships that our officers in the school are connecting with children like they never have before. And it's involved in some pretty cool things. Specifically back home, we launched a program called Camp Journey, and Camp Journey is a great camp that goes on with our school-age kids, and it really helps them connect in a big way. So these school resource officer positions are pretty valuable.
And you worked on this bill in the regular session, and there was just some language that we needed to change for this session, right?
Yeah, that's right. And just to add the state policeman in is all we're changing here.
So what does that do?
Yep. So just here what we saw is, and sometimes in the state code, the definitions slightly differs between law enforcement officer and state policeman. State policeman could be anyone in those areas where we're serve on the state level. This just ensures that they can be included and continue to work in their retirement status at that new increased cap.
Okay. What's the? It's got to be a very the dollars that we spend on to allow them to do that has to be a very good investment, a return on our investment for something like this.
You know, so many of these guys, regardless if you're local law enforcement or state police, you live in that community. And so many of these guys that are wanting to go back and serve, and I shouldn't say just guys, men and women, right? So many great female officers that they're going into schools that are right there in their community. Maybe they even still have kids in those schools, perhaps even grandkids in those schools. And so it's allowing them, instead of just to put that law enforcement career to rest, these men and women, and I can tell you that ability and desire to want to serve my community hasn't changed from the day I was 23 years old till it has today. And so this gives them a chance to get in the schools right there in their community and serve. So if the local, whether it be a municipality or county sheriff's office, if their budget is allowing to bring in school resource officers and hire them, this increase in cap, where it went to 52,000, allows them to keep an officer in the school more, allows them to pay them to be at more events, not just in the classroom, but the basketball events, football games, baseball. Anytime that there needs to be or could be a presence of a law enforcement officer, this gives them that opportunity to go. And so maybe even doing travel as they go out of town with these school teams. So anything that allowed them to earn more money in retirement, as this did, is a great benefit. And at the end of the day, the bottom line here was to try to do what we could to increase school safety. And now with that goal, this helps us have a larger pool of applicants to do so.
Awesome. Now, who all worked with you on this bill?
Well, I'd say, Chairman Reynolds is always, with his law enforcement background, he's been a huge champion of this bill, and he's worked really hard on it. So I think if I'm going to point to anyone to give a lot of credit, Chairman Reynolds and his work with the retirement systems to ensure that the retirement systems there's no issues or problems there, and there's not. The language came from them to ensure that we're meeting everybody's needs here. So, any of the guys in here that have served in law enforcement, I think Chairman Reynolds has been so fantastic to conference with us and make sure that what we're seeing in our own communities, any of those challenges related to this, would the language meet those? And as we look around our own pool of applicants in Shelby County, whether you have county deputies that are in retirement, municipal police officers in retirement, state troopers in retirement, this now allows them to get back to work if that's what they want, and again, serve in their community.
One of the good things about being able to praise Chairman Reynolds, and I'm with you, I think he's done a tremendous job, is this session here is not about a general fund budget, so we're praising him when we're not asking for anything from him.
That's right. That's right. We don't even need anything from him, but yeah, his heart is what he's a great example of a guy who had served his community in law enforcement, and he still has a heart to serve his community in that way. And so that's what I really appreciate about him, that he's thinking of others in his profession, and even though he's still not actively serving. And so, at the end, who's the winner here? Well, the winner is going to be all of our schools, the communities. I know in one of my other counties that I serve, Bibb County, they're beginning an earnest and honest process of a program to try to put school resource officers in all of their schools. And that's a tremendous endeavor. And again, this will help them find those people who can serve in their retirement status.
I want to commend you for your service as well, your passion for this issue, your passion to bring this bill and fight on this way that you have fought for this. It's not just Chairman Reynolds, it's you as well that has done a tremendous job. And I really do appreciate everything you've done to get this bill across the finish line.
Well, thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Chair, thanks, gentlemen. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Lee, Chairman Lovern.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative, for bringing this bill today and your work, and Representative Reynolds with the work you've done to do this, continue to expand. And the way I look at this bill, it doesn't do any real expansion of the program. It just expands the applicant pool of who's available to apply for these jobs. So
that's right. I mean, in my career, I've known a lot of guys who would fall under that definition or title of state policeman. And there's always been a little bit of a carve out, a little bit of a difference between the definition of a law enforcement officer and state police and our state code. And so, certainly when this bill was brought forth in the regular session, there was not an attempt to cut them out of it. It was one of those things, we say it all the time, an unintended consequence, right?
Sure.
And so many of those men and women who served on the state level as a state policeman, they live in Auburn, they live in Alabaster, and if they had the chance to go back and serve in their retirement status, to give back to their community in a way to protect the students in their school system, we've helped them through this.
Sure. Well, we've spoken some in committee about how the importance, school safety, how we can have different debates on the type of education, what's being taught in our schools, and different laws that are out there that we may be a part with, but safety of our children, we all come together. And, one insert I looked up was just even from the whitehouse.gov, just kind of show how bipartisan it is. This was out in 2013. During the Obama administration, and talks about school resource officers, and says, if I'll just share that, can I share that with you?
Yeah, absolutely.
A couple minutes?
Please.
You got a couple minutes? Of course, the vast majority of schools are secure and our children are safe at school. However, the time is ripe to reassess ways to improve the overall school climate and look beyond simply having more police officers in schools. Let's expand the look of what those officers' roles are. School resource officers are members of the law enforcement community who teach, counsel, and protect the school community. When SROs are integrated into the school system, the benefits go beyond reduced violence in schools. The officers often build relationships with students while serving as a resource to students, teachers, and administrators to help solve problems. For students with mental illness, use of drugs or alcohol can be a key risk factor of committing acts of violence. Recent research at that time showed that those with a severe mental illness or a substance abuse disorder have a greatly increased relative risk of violence compared to those with neither diagnosis. Since SROs can help infuse substance abuse and violence prevention messaging in schools throughout the school system, they can play an important role in school safety plans. School resource officers are not always an armed guard, but they're standing sentry in the school entrance. These men and women receive training and counseling, other skills that help them be effective in a school setting. Part of a school resource officer's job is building relationships with the students and faculty, and the job often doesn't end at the close of the school day. They can be present at extracurricular activities in the school hallways, building trust with the students, School resource officers can get involved if they believe a young person may pose a danger to the school community. They can even visit students at home and speak with parents and family if necessary. Keeping young people safe and healthy is a prime motivator for all of us, and properly trained SROs can play an important role in creating a school community where young people thrive and are prepared to meet the challenges of the 21st century. I agree wholeheartedly with that. And I, just in our own community with my children, they see their SROs, and, my time in the fire service, we always had good relationships with police officers, and I'd see them out, and my kids would go up and give them a high five. They would know my kids by name, and it's all back to their time as a SRO working with that school. And when you pull up in your school and you're dropping kids off and you see either that officer standing out there greeting or you see that police car parked out there, the last thing on my mind that day is there'll be a problem at that school, because I know there's a trained officer there that is there, that his number one job that day is to look out for the safety of the kids in that building. And to me, it's a no-brainer. And when we talk about the mentor relationship, I look at, when it comes to raising my own kids, it's a village concept that my kids are today, not just by what me, my wife, and their grandparents have put into them. It's the entire environment of people around them. And we're lucky to have a community that comes together and SROs are right in there with that community. So I know you see it in yours as well, and you got school-age children, and they're being impacted, and it's I would share a bunch of good police officer jokes, but I don't want to insult you here.
We'll stay away from those.
Yeah, I know you got some good firefighter jokes too. It's about movie time at the fire station, but
nap time right after lunch, right?
Right. So what, like in your own department, how many people do you think are roughly allocated to the SRO program?
I'll say this: as you were reading the description of everything about the SRO, I can distinctively recall the series of shootings we've had in my career as a law enforcement officer. And so when we began the idea in talking about placing a deputy or an officer inside the school, it seemed like a really foreign idea back then. But now, as you read that description there, those are something that we can all relate to, because all of us have those same experiences with a school resource officer, or know about it, or you've seen that officer now present in the schools. You've seen them offering the high fives. So out of the negatives that we've had to experience in our country, we have seen the really positive there is having law enforcement officers inside the schools, building those relationships with the young people. And that pays off huge dividends, as those young people now, as they grow up and become teens, they always have those school resource officers in their life that meant a lot to them. I can think of men inside of my own agency that, if I'm honest, they were good deputies, but they're great school resource officers. The ability they've had to go inside an elementary school and just let those kids treat them like a piece of playground equipment, climbing all over them. Deputy Carnell Buford from Shelby County comes to mind. He's a former college football player, a veteran of our military, but he's the kindest, gentlest, loving person inside that school. When he got deployed on a military assignment and he came back, the children treated him to a hero's welcome back inside the school. I mean, it brought tears to everyone's eyes to see how much Deputy Buford meant to him. Now retired Deputy James Sellers, during COVID and the schools were locked down, he launched a YouTube channel or streaming channel so he could still read to his students every single day while the schools were locked down. And he would log in, and the kids waited for story time. He was also extremely creative using 3D printers, and he would make things for them out of 3D printing devices that were like a guitar or something like that. I mean, these things, they wouldn't have been possible to build those relationships unless we put SROs in our schools. So this is just a couple examples of men who really excelled in their role as school resource officers.
Sounds like you had some officers that really have a lot of skill sets beyond law enforcement. I'd met several police officers over the years, and I really felt if they'd have made just a little higher on the test, they might end up being firefighters. So
It's quite possible.
all right. But I appreciate you explaining it more. And, I've always been supportive of this program, and just this time with you at the mic has helped even more solidify that support. So appreciate you taking the time and addressing this week. It's tough during a special session to address additional items outside the call, but this is a priority. And this is something that's important to our children, important to Alabama, and I appreciate you taking the effort to carry this today. So thank you for your time.
Yep,
So
thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chair, thanks the gentleman. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Lauderdale, Representative Pettis.
Good job.
So we're filibuster Mountain Dew. I understand. I didn't realize that at the beginning.
Hey, I'm one of the other ones. I want to thank you for bringing this bill. I guess you know I'm a retired state trooper. I've had several of them that's retired. They're hoping this would come through the special session because they got, I guess RSA, the way they interpret it, said that they were not covered under this. So I think this will help even the troopers that are already doing it, keep them from being penalized like they'll put them in the same line as other officers. One thing I know was talking about SROs. So many people seem like kids, a lot of them are scared of the police. You always hear, and I think this program really helps kids get to know how a police officer is. They're in uniform. They see them every day. They say they're human beings just like everybody else is. They're not, hopefully they won't be scared of them.
Yeah, it's a big help. I can tell you, and I don't know what your experience was, but in my career, anytime if I was in a public establishment, a restaurant, and I was having a meal, and it wouldn't be uncommon to hear a parent look over or point towards me and tell their child, if you don't behave, that man's going to take you to jail. And that's the worst thing that we can tell our kids. I mean, the parents are the disciplinarians, but we don't want the children to grow up with the mindset that if you don't behave, this man's going to take you to jail. There should be always a healthy respect for authority. That's in all of our lives, right?
Yes.
We submit to that authority through our personal beliefs and our faith in God. But what we want is to build those relationships. Our young people should be able to come to a law enforcement officer and trust them. And that's been the greatest thing to come out of the school resource officer program. Because these young people are building that relationships. And then with that, law enforcement had to take on a greater responsibility through their training to be able to know how to build those relationships, right? Because you can't send just anyone into the school system as a school resource officer and say, go do your job. There has to be specialized training, and there's great organizations. The National Association of School Resource Officers offers such great training every year. For those officers to go in the school and know how to work those relationships and counsel with them. And so good things are going on there, and I'm hopefully this will help us even carry on that mission even better.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Yep, thank you. Yep. So, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to make a motion to carry this over, please. Call the chair.
You have the motion to carry the bill over to the call of the chair. All in favor say aye. Aye. Bill has been carried over. Clark, we got a Senate message from Senate Bill 5. Bring it up, please.
Message from the Senate, Mr. Speaker. The Senate has non-concurred in the House amendment to the following Senate bill, Senate Bill number 5, to amend the Code of Alabama 1975 for the reapportionment and redistricting of the state's United States congressional districts, and requests a committee on conference. And the Senate has appointed as the committee on part of the Senate, Senators Livingston, Schofield, and Singleton. Signed, Pat Harris, Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, I move the House accede to the Conference Committee for the Senate.
You've heard the sponsor's request. Clerk will unlock the machine and the members will vote. Clerk will lock the machine, record the votes, 100 ayes, 1 nay. The bill has been carried over.
Mr. Speaker, I move the House stand in recess.
Oh, whoa. Wait a minute. Okay, we're going to exceed the wishes first. And let's do this. Our appointment for the conference committee would be Pro Tem Pringle, Chairman Sells, and Representative England. Pro Tem Pringle, you're recognized.
Now, Mr. Speaker, I move the House stand in recess until 1:30 p.m.
You've heard the request. The House stand in recess to 1:30 p.m. All in favor? Any opposed? We are in recess to 1:30.